Welcome to the Universalist Unitarian Church of Peoria. My name is Reverend Jennifer Innis, and it is my privilege to serve as the minister with this congregation. The members and friends, children and youth of this beloved community strive to fulfill our mission, follow our vision, and live in covenant. Creating a liberal religious community is a special effort for the sake of doing our part to help heal the world. Welcome to this gathering. It is so good to be together. For this year, we are exploring themes and resources from Soul Matters, a Unitarian Universalist source of worship information, small group study, and children and youth programs. Last month, we focused on healing, and this month, our theme is stillness. As part of our attention to the world, let us include listening to the earth around us as the seasons change and the cycles of life keep turning. We honor the Peoria nation who lived through so many cycles in their time before us. If you are new to this congregation, I invite you to help us get to know you. At the end of the service will be the link to our Zoom coffee hour, and all are invited to the conversation. And if you want to know more about the church, please send a note through the website to the church office. This congregation is sustained by the care and talent and generous gifts of our members and friends. If you would like to make a financial gift, see the link in the chat or in the slide at the end of the service. Now, I want to have a note for our music. It comes from several Unitarian Universalist sources. Our opening hymn is Morning Has Come by Unitarian Universalist minister, the Reverend Jason Shelton. Our middle hymn, Filled with Loving Kindness, is an adaptation of a traditional Buddhist chant. And our closing hymn is There Is a Love, from Unitarian Universalist musician Elizabeth Norton and Reverend Rebecca Parker. Thank you to Paul Thompson and the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Palouse in Moscow, Idaho, for producing these hymns. And thank you to Community Church of New York, Unitarian Universalist, for the interlude, Just as Long as I Have Breath. And now, let us enter into worship.
There is a Time to Let Go by Unitarian Universalist minister, Reverend Gretchen Haley. There is a time to let go of the resistance, the steadfast march to complete the to-do list for parents and activists and for all who love this life, these people, these mountains, this sky. There is a time to rest and to trust the world will go on filled with partners at the ready, all of us splitting shifts on this project of building and healing, tending and turning. Breath and being require their own practice, their own attention, and the heart needs time for becoming stronger after the shattering, the opening wider, the learning to love more and again. Come into this place, study stillness and joy. Know your belovedness like a memory calling out from the center of your being, connecting every little piece of everything to everyone and all of us. Feel here gratitude rising and praise for this chance to begin again this day with hope. Come, let us worship together.
Chalice lighting, adapted from the Oberlin UU Fellowship in Oberlin, Ohio. We light this chalice to find inner peace, love for each other, and faith in ourselves. We light this chalice to be welcoming to whomever we meet and kind to all living creatures. So gather around this light of hope as we share this time together.
Good morning. Today we are exploring the value of stillness. One man who learned the value of simple stillness was a prince from long ago named Siddhartha. Today I'm going to tell you one of the many versions of the story about the lesson he learned. It is called Under the Bodhi Tree by Deborah Hopkinson. In a long time ago, in a faraway place, a baby boy was born. His name was Prince Siddhartha. Before his birth, his mother dreamed of a beautiful white elephant. The wise men said it was a sign the baby would be special. And he was, just like babies then and now and everywhere, and just like you. The baby grew to be a kind and gentle child. Once he found a wounded swan and nursed it back to health so it could soar across the sky again. The little prince wanted to spread his wings too, but his father said, "You must stay here away from the world where I can keep you safe from any pain or sorrow." And so Siddhartha grew up behind the garden walls of a rich and splendid palace. He had new fine clothes, a grand white horse, the softest rice to eat. But like children then and now and everywhere, and just like you, he longed to discover the world. At last, when Siddhartha was a young man, his father let him visit the great city. The king ordered the mayor, "Hold a festival in the market with flowers, song, and dance. My son must see only happy sights." But of course, the prince was curious and wandered off to explore. And that is how he first came to see hardship, pain, and suffering. First, he gave a sip of water to a person lying sick with fever. Next, he helped an old man with an aching, crooked back cross the street. Then he bowed his head to share a grieving family's sorrow. Siddhartha's heart felt heavy and his own eyes filled with tears. He could not stop wondering, how can I help others? "You can do much good as a prince," the king told his troubled son. Siddhartha shook his head. "Even the wisest ruler cannot stop sickness, old age, and death," he said. "I want to find a way to help people live in ease and peace." And so, like seekers then and now and everywhere, the prince set off to find his way, just as you may do someday. At first, Siddhartha looked to others for answers. He journeyed far and long and followed many different paths. But he still felt lost, like a little ship in a stormy sea, tossed by wind and waves. One day, Siddhartha came upon the welcoming shade of a tall, majestic tree. His spirits rose, and he thought, perhaps the answer is inside me. I will stay in this pleasant grove until I find a way to peace. Then I can teach others too. So Siddhartha crossed his legs in quiet meditation. Many days passed. Raindrops fell, cool breezes blew, the sun beat down. And still Siddhartha sat, sheltered by the rustling heart-shaped leaves of the old and lovely tree. Once, a woman named Suyata passed by and thought, he looks weak and hungry. She brought him sweetened milk and rice. She smiled and said, please accept this gift. If you are hungry, you should eat. Siddhartha tipped back the bowl to taste the delicious treat. The rice and milk was warm and sweet. Thank you for your kindness, he said. On that clear and brilliant night, waves still rippled the surface of his mind. But now the prince just let his fears and worries come and go, and kept on breathing mindfully, in and out, deep and slow. Soon, even the sighing, heart-shaped leaves grew still, as serene as Siddhartha's mind. And then, just before dawn, he looked up in the eastern sky. A bright planet appeared, the morning star. At that moment, like the swan so long ago, Siddhartha felt himself soar, aware, free, and fully alive. His worries fell away, and he saw clearly that all things fit together, big and small, hard and easy, joyful and sad, all part of one wondrous world. In a time long ago, in a place far away, a baby boy was born. His name was Prince Siddhartha. Today, we call him the Buddha, the awakened one. Buddha did not stay alone under the heart-shaped leaves of the sacred Bodhi tree. Instead, he rose and went into the world to show the way of peace to others. Then and now and everywhere. And yes, of course, to you and me. May we do the same. So be it.
Just as long as I have breath, I must answer yes to life. Though with pain I made my way, still with hope I meet each day. If they ask what I did well, tell them I said yes to life. Just as long as vision lasts, I must answer yes to truth. In my dream and in my dark, always that elusive spark. If they ask what I did well, tell them I said yes to truth. Just as long as my heart beats, I must answer yes to love. Disappointment pierced me through, still I kept on loving you. If they ask what I did best, tell them I said yes to love.
our joys and sorrows, we meet in the spaces between us, in stillness, in music, heard or unheard. The apparent void teeming with the you and the I that overlap in this one sacred living moment. We meet in the spaces between us. And we meet to share our joys and sorrows and our names and milestones. I want to thank Shar Ricky for putting our names together this week. And we begin with our condolences. We offer our heartfelt sympathy to Terry Glynn and daughters Christy and Kathy as they mourn the passing of their wife and mother, Carol Glynn, on November 23rd. We also offer our sympathy to Jan and Pat Malloy and their family as they grieve the passing of Jan's mother, Peggy Murphy, on November 27th. And we move from condolences to wishes for health. We want to offer our wishes for a complete and speedy recovery to Darcy Peterson, who is ill. And let us extend our thoughts among us and beyond us to all those who are suffering from COVID-19, to those who are caring for those who suffer, and to those who have lost family, friends, neighbors, co-workers. Let us take this moment and recognize the deep grief that is among us, the sorrows that we are sharing, and the sorrows that are living in our hearts, and can feel that we are the only ones who are in such pain. Let us take one more moment in silence for all the joys and sorrows, for the names and the milestones that live in our hearts and remain unspoken. Amen. For this Sunday, we have a breath meditation that is in keeping with the Buddhist theme that we are exploring for the worship this Sunday. And this meditation is from the Unitarian Universalist minister and also a Buddhist, Reverend Sam Trumbore. Let us begin. Let us turn inward now. Feel the rhythm of the breath. In and out. In and out. Find the peace of just being with the flow of the breath. Letting go of yesterday and tomorrow. Feel the restorative power of the peace of this moment. It is a peace large enough to open to the concerns and sorrows that trouble us. It is a stillness, quiet enough to respond to the joys and celebrations that enliven us. There is safety here in the rhythm of the breath. The ebb and flow of life is enacted with each one. Taking in oxygen sustenance, letting go of carbon dioxide waste. Taking in the fullness of experience and letting go of the residue that wants to cling to us. Cultivate inner peace and inner safety in this worship. dedicated to cultivating the spirit of life, dedicated to being a beacon of love for all beings. We take one more moment and tend to the breath, breathing in and breathing out. So may it be.
May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be peaceful and at ease. May I be whole. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you be well. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you be well. May you be peaceful and at ease. May you be whole. May we be filled with loving kindness. May we be well. May we be filled with loving kindness. May we be well. May we be peaceful and at ease. May we be whole.
I begin with the chant from the Peace Pagoda in Leverett, Massachusetts, where I first had a chance to practice Buddhism when I was in college. And this is from the Lotus Sutra. Mamyum Yoho Renge Kyo, Mamyum Yoho Renge Kyo, Mamyum Yoho Renge Kyo, Mamyum Yoho Renge Kyo. In essence, the Lotus Sutra tells us that everyone has the potential to become enlightened. Everyone. But it takes time. While we are in this period, this December month, that is full of holidays and holy days, many of which involve a lot of waiting and expectation and hoping for something to come, we ourselves are in another moment of expectation with the news that vaccines for COVID-19 are on their way, are in process. We have this promise of relief, and still we are called to be patient in this moment. It seems to me that it might be worth returning to a practice that speaks very much to expectation and attachment and how to be present and attend to the now. So my question is, how might Buddhism show up in December? Now, Buddhism is thousands of years old, and the core of it calling us to attention to meditation and awareness of suffering and wishing for peace. The premise is, may all sentient beings be free from suffering. To say a little bit more about Buddhism, there are 4 noble truths, especially around suffering. That the first is that to acknowledge the presence of suffering, that everyone, everywhere suffers, and all beings are subject to it. And that is a common bond between us, that the existence of suffering. And that presence of suffering includes the attachment of the self as well, the construct that there is a fixed identity, that there's the idea of permanence. The second noble truth is attachment to desire, being the source of suffering. Attachment to wanting, to wishing, to hoping is itself a source of suffering. The third noble truth is letting go of desire. We can reflect on the nature of suffering and attachment as part of the process of letting go of those attachments and trying to release ourselves from suffering. And the fourth noble truth is the path of how to let go of desire. The way out of suffering is an 8-fold path around our thought and our behavior and our choices. So there is suffering. There is that attachment is the source of suffering, that we can let go of desire, and there is a path for letting go of desire. Now, the Buddha studied this and followed his path in order to encounter this and articulate it and then share it out with the world. But what you may not be so familiar with is where and how he accomplished this. And it happened to have something to do with a tree. One of the things I learned in the course of studying Buddhism was not only do we have, considering Buddhism in December, is that Buddhism has its own tree. Who knew? Now, and it speaks largely in this moment. So, to say something about the path of the Buddha himself, we heard the lovely story delivered by Amy, talking about how the prince was born into wealth, born into a wonderful kingdom, and the king wanted to keep everything that was unpleasant away from the prince so that he would not be concerned about the harms and the illnesses of the world. The king wanted only beauty for his prince. And when the prince finally saw illness and old age and death, he realized that as a prince he could only do so much, even though his father assured him that there was much he could do to ease the suffering of his people. Prince Siddhartha said, "No, there must be more than I can do," and left his life of the palace, and left all of the comforts to take up an ascetic life and to try to find a way out of suffering. And he renounced everything, Siddhartha did, and lived with others in an extreme lifestyle of constant yoga and meditation and very little food. And for some years, he continued with this practice until one day he woke up and realized that after all of that time and all of that struggle, he was no closer to enlightenment than when he started. And so he left the ascetics and found some food and was determined to find a path to help others relieve the suffering. And he sat down under the Bodhi Tree, vowing not to arise until he understood that path. And there's a number of accounts that might differ in this legendary story, but part of what's the story is that he was aided in his sitting by a young woman who brought him rice and milk, and thus sustained him in this path. And just by this gift, just by this woman who brought him this rice and milk every day, he already was becoming more open to finding a more balanced way. But he continued his meditation under the Bodhi Tree, and on the 8th morning it came to him the basic principles of what he called the middle way. It was not an extreme denial of the body and was not hiding from suffering, but he'd found the foundation of the path and acknowledging suffering and then acknowledging the way that people could be moving forward. So this tree might have been something pretty special, so let me say a little bit more about it. It was the Bodhi Tree, or the Bodhi Tree, and it was comes as a relative of the fig family. And for centuries after the Buddha, the tree became so famous that it was a symbol of the Buddha's presence and even an object of worship itself. There was a daughter of a king who had been a nun who kept a cutting of the tree in Sri Lanka and where it still grows. But the original tree and a few subsequent trees have been destroyed since then. And there is now the tree that grows at what's understood to be Bodhi Gaya, where this all happened with the Buddha. There is now currently a tree that came from a cutting previously. And many temples throughout the world also have Bodhi trees growing in them that are believed to be offspring from the tree as well. So here we have this Bodhi day that celebrates the moment that the Buddha underneath the Bodhi tree came into his awareness and awakening. So let me bring in how this ties in with Unitarian Universalism. So we're celebrating the Buddha finding his path, but then what does this mean for us? So Buddhism came to Unitarian Universalism and the Transcendentalists quite some time ago in 1844, when folks such as Ralph Waldo Emerson and Henry David Thoreau studied Buddhist and Hindu texts. They and their companions, these Western Christians as they were, did not understand how Buddhism wasn't about God per se. And these Western Christians kind of used Buddhism to project all manner of assumptions of things they wanted to see in spiritual practice. To be fair, they were encountering religious and ethical texts of multiple cultures and from a range of translations from the original languages into English. And also the Buddhist vocabulary has a very different premise and perspective than Western Christianity. But over time, they studied, and now we have learned more about culture and context and language. And Buddhism in Unitarian Universalism has been a rising tradition for some decades. And some of the basics of Buddhism were part of my Unitarian Universalist Sunday school classes and in the literature available to everybody in the congregation where I grew up. And even more recently, you have Unitarian Universalist Buddhists have developed their own communities or sanghas as part of local congregations. And now there's even a form of Buddhism called the Boundless Way. And that Boundless Way was created by people who were active Unitarian Universalists, as well as students who have received Dharma teachings in certain lines of Buddhism. And there's even been some Unitarian Universalist ministers part of this work as well, including James Ishmael Ford. So that's a little bit of the history of where Buddhism and Unitarian Universalism encounter each other. But where this comes down to and how do we kind of relate and respond? Because a number of us kind of talk about Buddhism, and I've heard us in the congregation already, I've heard people in Unitarian Universalism in the past kind of come into this study of Buddhism and this liberal religion. And we enter into it in a few different ways, but here's one way of describing this, and this is from Lama Surya Das, talking about Unitarian Universalist voices. in Buddhism. And she says, Buddhism and Unitarian Universalism value many of the same things, including experiential practice, study, and self-inquiry, mindful awareness, cultivation, insight, and wisdom development, and loving kindness. And we combine that with active compassion in the world. So this is the heart, she says, of sacred activism, empowering, edifying, elevating, transforming, and liberating. So we take this attention to the study of what is in front of us, learning from traditions of the past, reflecting on the wisdom of teachers, and then saying, how can we bring this into our moment now and reduce the suffering in the world? Part of why I so appreciated the chance to return to this study is we're anticipating Bodhi Day, which is coming up on December 8th, in fact, in the Japanese traditions. I think this is one of those moments of where we get to return to practice, and return to reflection, and return to meditation. So this is, for me, in my opportunity, a return to the practice that I have been enjoying for quite some time. I started this as an active practice when I was in divinity school, and I was in a period of waiting, in fact, as I was in formation for ministry, and was waiting to go before the final credentialing body that would say, yes, you are welcome into fellowship and can go off and be a minister. So I had this opportunity as I was home in Massachusetts and near the congregations where my family had been connected. And one of them was the First Unitarian Church in Worcester, in Massachusetts, and they housed the Worcester Zen Center. And it just so happened those folks were deep practitioners and, as it ended up being, founders of the Boundless Way. And some of the main teachers included David Reinick and Melissa Blacker. And Melissa was part of the Center for Mindfulness with John Kabat-Zinn. And so we would have a Monday practice of sitting and walking and Dharma teachings and sitting again. And going every week for 1 year, 2 years, really established that ongoing practice for me. This was attention, not attachment. This was sitting and paying attention to the breath and the body, and also offering myself a lot of grace for when my thoughts drifted to things that were in the past or expecting something to happen in the future. And in every moment, I had the grace of being able to come back to my attention. And I could practice again and again and again. And there was no right or wrong in essence. It was, you can always return to practice. There was always room to come back. You are always welcome. And you can always continue. We have this opportunity to keep practicing and keep learning how to give ourselves and others similar kinds of grace, to pay attention to what is needed, and to see our humanity in each other and in ourselves. Unitarian Universalist and Buddhist Robert Senges tells us that Buddhism teaches us to accept the reality of our moral and emotional and living relationships, to accept them, but not by ourselves attaching to them, since they are all impermanent. All relationships are in transition from one moment to the next. Nor should we detach ourselves, he says. We shouldn't detach ourselves from life in order to escape suffering, because we will not escape, but will indeed suffer more, because we are then threatened by every vicissitude of life, including our own certain death. The trying to escape will cause even more suffering by being pulled back and forth by the throes of life itself. He says, the Dharma teaches us to enter fully into the life of your mind and heart and live a life of supreme importance, with mind and eyes and heart fully open and aware that everything we have and everything we are, he says, is impermanent and at the same time of supreme importance. That the life that is before you and within you is the life that is most important right now. And he says, grieve when you are called to grieve. Die when it comes your time to die. And love and accept love in this wonderful, terrible, wonderful world. So this intersection of Unitarian Universalism and Buddhism calls us and reminds us of the wonder that is life before us, but doesn't hide the suffering and the challenges and the difficulty of it either. We have this life before us. We are precious. Our entire lives are precious and are meant to be loved. We are meant to be agents of compassion in the world and exercise that love. And we can become more wise as we listen and learn from ourselves and from each other and from the wisdom of ages. We can bring that wisdom and compassion out beyond our lives and keep being in service to ease the suffering of all that is. That might be worth sitting under a tree for a while, whether it's the Bodhi Tree or whether it's the Christmas tree, or whether simply being in the woods as we are in this winter. I want to close with the current message from the monks at the Peace Pagoda, where I first had a chance to practice in Massachusetts, because they are keeping up with the times as well. And they say, these are times when we are all called to be our best, to be compassionate, considerate, and wise in our thoughts and words and actions. We will do the simple things we can, like washing hands and eating healthy food, and boost our immune system. We will chant and drum and stay in when possible, walk the land as well. And we will always work to keep a positive and calm mindset to help everyone weather these storms. They say, as always, we encourage you to reach out to your neighbors and be in service to those to whatever degree you are able, and to reach out to others when you need support as well. Together, they remind us, we move through, knowing that we are one. So may we realize that for ourselves. Let us go in peace. Amen.
There is a love
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Go now in peace. Deeply regard each other. Truly listen to each other. Speak what each of you must speak, and be ready in any moment to disarm your own heart and always live as if a realm of love had begun. Let us go forth, committed to easing the suffering that is in our hearts and those of our neighbors. Let us take in this moment, this present moment, in every moment of our lives. So may it be. Amen. Our worship is ended. Let our service begin.